Hi there, welcome to today's video. I'm Natasha of Natasha Miller Creates, and today I'm setting up my bullet journal for the month of January. For this year, I thought I'd do something a little bit different for my bullet journal setups. Normally I choose my themes based on a topic that inspires me or illustrations that I'm working on, or, fly by the seat of my pants if I'm running late. But for 2025, I thought I would do something a little bit different. For 2025, I decided that my theme will be determined by randomly selecting a mini brand egg and pulling a theme and a color palette based on the surprise egg that I've chosen. So in this bag are 12 eggs that will be my themes for the year. So starting with January, we're going to pull out an egg and see what that theme's going to be. So for January 2025, my theme is going to be based on Mini Brand Creates MasterChef. Let's open this guy up and see what my theme is going to be. So I didn't want to rob you guys of the experience of setting up the mini brand egg. So I have that video up in the top left-hand corner. If this is too distracting, let me know down below, but I definitely wanted to share what the theme was and then, of course, putting it together because that's part of the fun. But let's talk about what's the point. Specifically, what's the point of creative bullet journaling and spending so much time drawing in a notebook? And secondly, publishing a video for a January setup when it's practically the middle of January. Now I know it's not the middle of January, but it's starting to feel like it, so let's just go with it. So firstly, let's address the why bother putting this much effort into a notebook. So firstly, I apologize for my head being in the frame. It's been a while since I've actually shown my drawing process. I realized I always draw on my iPad, but I rarely ever show how I draw on camera in my bullet journal. So that was the purpose of this. And this ties into the why I spend so much time doing this. So like most people in this community, I do struggle with depression and anxiety, and I do have ADHD as well. And I have developed, like most of us, unhealthy coping mechanisms. My coping mechanisms tie into over shopping and binge eating. Now, coming out of the holidays, I tend to find the holidays stressful in general. And this particular season was a little bit more challenging than I anticipated. So I've really been struggling the last couple of weeks to pull myself out of the funk that I'm in. So without trauma dumping, I opened my journal and I started sketching and coloring, and I started feeling better. And that is one of the primary reasons why I like to spend so much time doing creative journaling, because it is that stress relief for me and it does give me a healthier outlet. And it's fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy experimenting with new and different products. For example, here I am using oil pastels. I can give you a spoiler alert. It did not go as well as I wanted it to, but it inspired some ideas for an art piece that I want to create using these oil pastels to kind of get more used to the product. And so what I really love about experimenting in my bullet journal like this is it kind of sparks that creativity and sparks that curiosity and leads to more, or it leads to better outlets for me. So for example, I'm already starting to plan out this art piece that I want to create. So since this was experimentation for me, I wasn't quite sure. I didn't want to smudge the pastel with my fingers because I wanted it to stay within the bounds that I'd drawn instead of being more abstract and free-flowing. So I ended up grabbing a blender pencil. I just have one from Prismacolor, and using the blender pencil to soften the pastel and it seemed to work. I don't know if that's the right technique, but I'm excited to go watch some videos and learn more about coloring with oil pastels. I do recognize that Crayola oil pastels might not be the best oil pastel out there, but this is something that I wasn't willing to spend a lot of money on at the time. If I play with these and I decide I like it, then I'll look at upgrading. But for now, these are good enough for me. You see me going in and I'm adding some shadows and outlines to the cake. It's a chocolate cherry cake. That was the theme of the surprise egg. And it was actually really easy and fun to draw. So let me know if you want some tips on how to draw that, because honestly, it was quick, it was easy. What took long was the coloring process, especially because I used pastels and I wanted to use the pastels on the food items to give it more texture and more interest. For the rest of the piece, I'm using acrylographs. it ends up looking like a smooth, sticky chocolate caramel, which is what it was. And it actually took a long time to set. So the actual toy itself was a resin piece, and it took the resin forever to set, so not an avenue I'm willing to explore. But using the acrylographs, I was able to get that same effect. The only issue is that acrylographs were taking a while to dry as well. So I colored in the base of the cake stand and then went into drawing my chocolate caramel. I do love using acrylographs. They are my go-to because they're so opaque and you can draw over top of anything and they work so well. I did want to try using other mediums, but I just ended up leaning into what I like, which is fine too. Stick to what you like and stick to what you have, because that's what's going to help you actually finish the piece instead of giving up part way. So I didn't touch the oil pastels for the rest of the setup. I just used them for this, decided it wasn't for me, and moved on. Now back to the touchy-feely stuff. Once I was done doing this cover page, I felt so much better. I was lucky enough that I did get to finish it all up in one sitting, which is actually very rare. But it was just fun. I had my kids watching a movie and I was just able to sit and create, and it really felt better. I have spoken before about how creative journaling is part of my mental wellness and creative wellness routine, but it was definitely very relevant for this month's setup. Now, I mentioned a second reason why there's a point to posting this video at this time, and that is to let people know that they are not alone. I know I'm not the only one that dragged my feet setting up my bullet journal for January. I'm rarely ever setting up my journal on time nowadays, and I just wanted to emphasize that there's always a point. So I do use my journal to stay on top of things. I do use it as a planner. It's very important. Knowing that I wouldn't have anything for the first full week of January was making me anxious. So I do like having a place to organize everything. And so regardless of when it gets done, it is important for me to have it set up. I guess that is another point I want to emphasize, is that just because it's late doesn't mean it's pointless. If it's something you use or something you rely on, then do it. It doesn't have to be an absolute masterpiece. It doesn't have to be more involved, but get it done to at least to the point where it works for you, so that way you can still stay on top of things and then maybe not have that guilt with, oh, but I didn't set up my journal this month, which is silly, but I do feel it too. So I'm not judging anybody for feeling that way at all. Now, you didn't think I was going to do a monthly bullet journal setup and not do any stamping. I decided to stamp the heading for January. I'm using my new set that I purchased from Ali Edwards. It was part of her sale on her website, so I'm not sure if it's still available, but I've linked it down below. I absolutely love how well this font went with my theme. This is fast becoming one of my favorite stamp sets. This setup solidified this being one of my favorite stamp sets. If you are interested in learning more about stamping in your journal, I do have some videos out that you can check out. I look at the different ink types and how they work in the different journals, as well as different stamp qualities and different stamp materials that you can decide what's going to work best for you. I'm using my acrylographs to color in my tabs. I've said in the past, I feel like it reinforces the tab a bit better since it does dry a little bit plasticky, but it's still water-based, so it doesn't cause bumps or anything if you're writing on that portion of the page. One thing I haven't addressed yet is my quote page. Know your value instead of proving your worth. I really like this quote. It really does resonate with me. It's definitely something that I'm having to repeat to myself over and over again. Last year wasn't too bad. Last year was pretty good, stood up for myself a lot, and things worked out really well. And so I just wanted to remind myself to carry that into January and 2025. For the most part, I am repeating the same layout structure for my monthly setups that I did last year with a couple of changes. I'm setting up my calendar page, which is the same as I did for 2024. And this has become one of my most used pages. I really love being able to see everything on one page, and I rely on this one a lot. So kept it the same. I included the to-do lists again, which I picked up from Joshi Corin, who uses it to just kind of make notes for the week and things that are important for that week. So that's what the column on the far right is for. And then, of course, carrying over my theme. So I used the same stamp set, and I decided to just do some calligraphy or faux calligraphy for my days of the week. This is about the time where I started started cursing myself. So you couldn't really see it on the video, but when I finished my cover page, I decided to go in and outline my cake with a drawing pen, and I really love how it turned out. But that meant I had to go and outline everything with the drawing pen for the rest of the setup, and that included the faux calligraphy, and that was taking forever. So I have sped up this video quite a bit because there's only so much value in watching somebody outline lettering. And that is probably what took the longest, or out of everything I did for this setup, that was probably where I was cursing myself the most, was deciding to outline all the tiny little elements and the lettering. So another thing I was actually really proud of, my oldest son came to check out what I was doing, and he saw my cover page, and then he saw my little pieces of cake at the bottom of my calendar page, and he told me that technically it is mathematically correct because there are 8 slices, and 8 slices are easy to cut in a cake. It wasn't my intention to make it mathematically correct, but I will take it. And honestly, coming from him, that was a compliment. So again, I will take it. So there is one more thing I want to talk about in terms of what is the point of doing this. And that is probably the most important point of all. And it's because I want to and because I can. The first time I said those words out loud was a very cathartic experience. I felt very calm and stopped feeling the need to justify my choices to strangers who are coming from a place of judgment and a place of trying to put me down and kind of make fun of what I do. I remember talking to another mom we just met, and she was telling me that she was a stay-at-home mom, and she started justifying why. So to be there for her kids, and things were really busy, and I didn't cut her off, but pretty close. And I said, because you wanted to and you could. And her eyes grew wide and she said, yes, exactly. So long as you're not doing anything that's harming yourself or others, if you want to do it and you're able to do it, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's kind of silly that we feel the need to justify these choices and these decisions. And a lot of the times it's to people that are strangers or shouldn't matter. So next time you're in this situation, say those words out loud and see how it makes you feel and see how the situation pans out. And hopefully it'll work out for you the way it has worked out for me so far. So I think we're done with the soapboxing today, so we can get back to the setup. I'm coloring the cherries and all the little elements the same way I did on the cover page, which is to go in and add some shadowing and some color. I did add a bit of shadowing onto the cake pieces. You can't see from here, but in person you can definitely see the shadowing. So I think it was worth it. And then of course the paint's wet, so it's reflecting the light. So it doesn't look like there's anything there, but there is. And I feel like it did make a difference. One small element that I added that wasn't really part of the surprise egg was to add a little bit of swirls of the chocolate caramel sticky gooey sauce, I guess. My idea was that when you do plate decorating for desserts, or at least when I order a dessert at a restaurant and it comes all neatly, nicely plated, it'll have a swirl of the sauce. And so that was my idea for adding a bit more to the background, which is to create those swirls, which are supposed to be swirls of sauce. For the record, those were a pain to outline as well. But again, I was committed at that point because I was busy outlining everything else. So a bit more background on deciding to use surprise eggs to decide my theme. I want you to say it with me. I wanted to and I could. No, I'm just joking. A bit more of the background was sometimes I struggle coming up with ideas for themes, and I don't always want to do something that's common or popular, but I also don't want to, reinvent the wheel or spend too much time trying to come up with an idea. So I decided to let fate step in and decide for me. So in terms of rules, right now there are no rules other than using a theme that's presented within the mini egg. And in terms of color palette, again, it's very open. This one was a bit more obvious, using the red and the brown for the chocolate and the cherries. And then I thought a blue would be really pretty to go with it. And I actually really loved this color palette and using this color palette. So now I've moved on to my monthly overview page. This page has probably seen the biggest change compared to what I was doing in 2024. I still kept the page title as monthly overview, and there are some elements that I kept from 2024, but then there were also elements dates that I adapted to what's probably going to be better suited for me in 2025. I'm still including important dates, and I still have 2 columns. But the first column's going to be for personal important dates, and the second column's going to be for professional important dates. I still have my art licensing priority, and I'm going to be allowing 3 priorities for my art licensing per month. And then for my goal focus, I'm going to have 2 items from my goals that I'm going to focus on monthly. That might be too much for me, in which case I'll only put down 1, but I have the option for 2. And if you watch my 2025 bullet journal setup, I have a project page where I'm tracking projects that I want to work on and the action steps. And for my monthly overview, I wanted to capture the action steps that I want to get done for the month. So then in 2024, my intention was to use the right-hand side of the page for one little word, but I didn't do that. And so I decided to use this in a more productive, intentional way. And I added a habit tracker. For 2024, I had been doing weekly habit trackers, and I decided to do them monthly. The weekly habit trackers were great, but I think it's going to be more meaningful to see all of that information in one place. The next change is the massive to-do list. So my idea here is to capture everything that I want to get done for the month. All the to-dos. So for example, this month I need to clean my car. I want to go through my clothes and look at what I can donate, and just those big overarching to-dos, so that when I look at my weekly to-dos, I can pull from this list and then see how much I've gotten done for the month and what I need to carry over into the next month, and hopefully try and capture those bigger items so that I feel less anxious in terms of when I sit down and I look at my weekly to-dos, I'm not forgetting anything or I'm not overlooking anything. So here's to seeing if this is going to work. And mini throwback to those swirls being annoying, especially when I decided to make it a border along the headings. That became a real pain. So now I'm working on my weekly layout. Since I've made the change to move the habit tracker from a weekly setup to a monthly setup, that gave me a bit more space to do my weeklies. What I ended up doing was I took up most of the space to extend my to-do list. If you watch my December 2025 video, I talk about some of the shortcomings of my setup that I'd been doing all of 2024. And that was, I felt like I was running out of space. So hopefully this will kind of help me claw back some space for my to-do list. I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I need to do for my dailies, but I feel like for my to-do list, I'm going to have that covered. And then I also left a little notes section. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to use this, but I kind of like the idea that it's there. So I'll give it a try for 3 months. If I don't use it, I can get rid of it completely. Otherwise, we'll see how I end up using it. So in terms of technical execution, I did run into some issues. I am very bad about cleaning my Acrylograph pens, and the pen I used to color in the side view of the pie ended up splotching everywhere, and it was a mini disaster. Again, what I like about Acrylographs is I was able to go over top of it with another color, not a problem, but because it was so splotchy and thick, it did take a little while to dry. So you will see my head pop in and out to check and see if the ink is dry enough to start trying to fix it. Throughout the layout, I kept adding little bits and pieces. This was definitely a case for less is more. It didn't turn out bad, but I think it could have been better. But at the same time, I just needed to finish and move on with the setup, especially because there are 4 weeks in January, or at least 4 weeks that I'm using my January setup for. And basically, I'm just repeating this layout over 4 pages or 4 layouts. So I was very motivated to just kind of get it done. In order to incorporate all the colors of the theme into the layout, I just changed up the colors I used for the circles for the days of the week, as well as the colors I used for the faux calligraphy and then the notes heading. And I thought that worked out pretty well. I tried to balance the colors with the tabs, and I thought it turned out really well. I was really happy with it, actually. It does make me happy to look at it now and see it all done. Yes, the colors are great, but I also really, again, love that Ali Edwards stamp. I'm really glad I got it. So the way I use my dailies will stay the same, but because I used a smaller font for the days of the week, I was able to squeeze in an extra line. Fortunately for dailies, it's not always, I don't always have a lot going on, but when I have a lot going on, it's nice to have that space. So that's kind of the idea that I'm trying to put together. Somebody pointed out to try using the Alistair method. I've actually been using the Alistair method for quite a few years now, and the to-do list that you see on the page is what I've adapted the Alistair method to work for me. Which, it's funny, it looks like a generic to-do list, but it actually came out of using and practicing the Alistair method. So this is where I ended up with the Alistair method. I really do like it. I have a video that you can check out on what that is, and maybe if that's something you use, let me know down below. And if it works for you, or if you've adapted it to work for you, let me know. And maybe it can inspire some other people as well. I'm finishing up the rest of the layout by including my checkboxes. I like to have these to check off. I guess in my mind, I have a key, which is part of the original bullet journal method, and I still incorporate that into this key. And I'm using my Archer and Olive B5 journaling stencil to draw the squares. Super quick and easy. And then the bane of my existence was outlining the elements. So that's what you see me doing. I mean, it looks good. I'm happy I did it, but it was just a bit tedious at the time. And finishing up with the grade lines in my journal. I like having these so that it's easier to see visually where I'm writing next without having to squint at my page if I'm tired. I feel like that's such a silly problem to have, but it does make a difference to me and how I use my journal. So the final page of my setup is the month in review page. This one stayed, again, more or less the same to what I was doing in 2024. I have my biggest accomplishment, other wins for the month, how I feel, how I'm planning on celebrating, and then my focus for the next month. For 2024, my intention for the right-hand side of the page was to do memory keeping element. I decided to keep that intention going into 2025. Unfortunately, last year I didn't use that page, but I want to be better about using that page this year, so I'm keeping it at least for the next 3 months to try and not force myself, but to try and encourage myself to use that page and fill it out. And, you know, I really love the idea of sketch notes, and just like everything else, in order to make good sketch notes, it's important to practice. So that I'm kind of going to treat like a sketch notes practice page. So I hope now that I have that challenge for myself, I'm more likely to use it. And just to be clear, I was terrible about using this layout consistently last year. So this year, I really want to focus on making this layout and this setup work for me. Normally, if something's not working for me, I'm happy to discard it and move on. But I really do think it's important to reflect on the month you've had and make a point of remembering what went well, what didn't, how it made you feel, and then of course celebrating your wins and celebrating your successes. So definitely going to make this more of an intention to fill this page out. So again, here's to using the setups that we create for 2025. I'm adding in little elements around the title. Did I have to do this? No. Do I regret doing it? A little bit, but it works out. So, and it also carries over the theme onto this page. Because of the memory keeping element on the right-hand page, I do like to keep this page a bit more neutral so that it kind of gives me more space to be creative in a way that works for memory keeping, or I don't feel the need that I have to stick to the strict theme or colors that I've used for the rest of the setup. Last but not least, grabbing my journaling stencil and putting in my squares, as well as my light gray Tombow to highlight my lines. I really enjoyed how this setup all came together, considering it started with a mini egg concept and then grew to this fun setup that I'm really going to enjoy using this month. And I think definitely the MVP for this month's setup goes to the Ali Edwards alphabet stamp set. So that was my soapbox and my January setup. So remember, if anybody asks you why or what's the point, because you can and you wanted to. I hope you enjoyed today's setup. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I am happy to answer them. I am happy to share. If there's something that I did in my journal that you're not sure of, I'm happy to share. Thank you for watching today. And for more bullet journal content, you can check out one of these 2 videos. I'll see you over there.